On KFCF in Fresno and online at kpfa.org.
Good evening. It's Monday, October 5th. President Trump back in the White House after a 72-hour stay at Walter Reed Hospital for COVID-19 treatment. The doctors say he's not cured. Trump says he's learned a lot about the disease.
I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it.
The curriculum must have admitted the personal responsibility unit back at the White House. President Trump takes off his face covering and dramatically poses for pictures maskless as the president who's licked COVID-19. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden says no more debates with Trump until health officials give him the all clear. A dozen associates of Trump and Republican lawmakers, including 3 GOP senators, all testing positive at the White House's COVID-19 hotspot. But the Republicans to push ahead anyway with their Supreme Court nominee, despite a shutdown of the Senate because of the COVID-19 outbreak. California Governor Gavin Newsom nominates the first openly gay black man to the California Supreme Court today. And the Alameda County District Attorney says she's reopening an investigation into the killing of 22-year-old Oscar Grant at a train station by a transit officer 11 years ago. From Pacifica Radio, KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, this is the Evening News. I'm Mark Miracle. Tonight, President Trump staged a dramatic return to the White House after leaving the military hospital where he's been receiving an unprecedented level of care for COVID-19. He immediately ignited a new controversy by declaring that despite his illness, the nation should not fear the virus that's killed more than 210,000 Americans. And then he entered the White House without a protective mask. Trump's performance alarmed infectious disease experts and suggested the president's own illness had not caused him to rethink his often cavalier attitude toward the disease, which has also infected the First Lady and several White House aides, including new cases revealed today. Landing at the White House on Marine One, Trump gingerly climbed the South Portico steps, removed his mask, and declared, "I feel good." He gave a double thumbs up to the departing helicopter from the Portico Terrace, where aides had arranged American flags for the sunset occasion, which was being videoed and photographed. He entered the White House, where aides were visible milling about the Blue Room without wearing a face covering. The president left Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, where his doctor, Navy Commander Sean Conley, said earlier today that the president remains contagious and would not be fully out of the woods for another week. Whatever Trump has been trying to do with his COVID-19 diagnosis, earn the sympathy of the American people, or prove he's truly the strong man that the nation needs to lead, initial polling seems to indicate it's not working, at least not yet. Lily Bolke reports.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is still leading President Donald Trump by double digits. In a Reuters and Ipsos poll, 65% of respondents believe Trump could have taken precautions to avoid the virus. That included about half of the Republicans who responded. Pollster Matt McDermott with Whitman Insight Strategies on this weekend's polls.
He's come down with coronavirus, and a number of his associates have as well. And it just doesn't seem especially surprising to the voters. And it's just not inciting the sympathy that I think would otherwise exist. This was just bound to happen. I mean, we've all seen the videos for months now of him holding White House events, him holding indoor rallies, him holding indoor fundraisers where no one's wearing a mask, everyone's sitting close together.
From Pacifica Network and Public News Service, I'm Lily Bolke.
And KPFA's Christopher Martinez has more.
President Donald Trump has left Walter Reed Hospital and returned to the White House, where he immediately removed his face mask before entering the building. It's the latest turn in a strange drama that began when Trump tested positive for COVID-19 and began showing symptoms like fever, fatigue, cough, and low blood oxygen levels. Trump was airlifted to Walter Reed Friday. Some people had hoped the experience would affect Trump's approach to the pandemic that has already killed more than 209,000 Americans. Trump spoke about the experience by video during his hospital stay.
So it's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it. And it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to be letting you know about it. In the meantime, we love the USA, and we love what's happening. Thank you.
After saying he gets it, Trump took an action that triggered criticism from public health experts.
I also think we're going to pay a little surprise to some of the great patriots that we have out on the street. And they've been out there for a long time, and they've got Trump flags, and they love our country. So I'm not telling anybody but you, but I'm about to make a little surprise visit.
On Sunday, Trump broke isolation for a ride in an SUV to greet supporters outside the hospital, accompanied by 2 Secret Service members. The move was blasted by attending physician James Phillips, the chief of disaster medicine at George Washington University's Department of Emergency Medicine. Phillips says everyone in the vehicle, in his words, now has to be quarantined for 14 days. They might get sick. They might die. For political theater. The action may have also violated Maryland's public health guidance on quarantine and isolation. Trump's hospital stay also drew controversy when Trump's doctors held a series of briefings where they seemed to resist giving specifics about Trump's medical condition. For example, dodging questions about Trump's oxygen levels. They also refused to say when Trump last tested negative, information that is important for contact tracing. That issue came up in a Monday briefing by Walter Reed doctors. Dr. Sean Conley is Trump's doctor.
Did you say when the last negative test was? Any abnormal test, any of his lab tests abnormal?
I'm not, again, HIPAA kind of precludes me from going into too much depth and things that I'm not at liberty or doesn't wish to be discussed. HIPAA kind of precludes me from going into too much depth and things that I'm not at liberty or doesn't wish to be discussed. At some future point, maybe.
At the Monday briefing, the doctors were upbeat.
He's up and back to his old self, predominantly.
Trump should be feeling better. He's on a series of medications, an unusual combination of drugs that is creating yet more questions. Trump is receiving an antiviral medication called remdesivir, normally given early in an infection. He's also received a cocktail of monoclonal antibodies. Strangely, he's also been given dexamethasone, a steroid usually given later in an infection to patients with lung involvement. It's a serious drug that is normally not given early because it can suppress the immune system. Rarer but serious side effects can include irritability, mania, paranoia, and psychosis. One reporter asked the doctors about that during their Monday briefing.
Can you talk to about whether he has any neurological symptoms? Does he have any side effects from his medications? Any fogginess from the virus?
No, I think you've seen the videos and now the tweets, and you'll see him shortly. He's back. Yeah.
Many observers are surprised that Trump is being released, even though he has yet to enter the crucial second week of infection, a dangerous period when cases can rapidly become more acute. Dr. Conley is not worried.
We all remain cautiously optimistic and on guard because we're in a bit of uncharted territory when it comes to a patient that received the therapies he has so early in the course. So we're looking to this weekend. If we can get through to Monday with him remaining the same or improving, better yet, then we will all take that final deep sigh relief. But as I said, 24/7 world-class medical care surrounding him down there. We're not going to miss anything that we would have caught up here.
Trump returns now to a White House that has more confirmed COVID-19 cases than New Zealand, Taiwan, and Vietnam combined. At least 28 people in the White House orbit have now been diagnosed with COVID-19, including Melania Trump, White House advisors Hope Hicks and Kellyanne Conway, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany and 2 of her deputies, 3 senators, and 2 members of the housekeeping staff. The White House residence includes about 90 staff, mostly Black and Latino, and older. The White House has announced it will not be conducting contact tracing. Meanwhile, the White House gift shop is now taking pre-orders for a commemorative coin with the message, President Donald J. Trump defeats COVID. Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
Clinical Professor Emeritus of Epidemiology at UC Berkeley School of Public Health, Dr. John Swartzberg, says there are many unanswered questions about Trump's condition.
I'd certainly like to know, in terms of the president's health status, what his imaging studies look like, whether he's on an anticoagulant to prevent blood clotting, which is a big problem, what his oxygen saturations actually are. The doctor was very vague and gave confusing remarks about his other organ system function, and I'd like to know all about that. In other words, I, as an American citizen, would like to know the status of the health of the President of the United States, and we're not getting that.
Schwartzberg noted the fact that Trump's oxygen saturation level dropped to 93, and that demonstrates his lungs have been affected by the virus infection. Doctors gave him a steroid, dexamethasone, typically only recommended for those who are very ill. He's also on a 5-day course of remdesivir, typically administered in a hospital, and also was given an experimental antibody drug. All the treatments and the mere fact that Trump was hospitalized so soon after exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms would seem to indicate an illness more serious than Trump, his doctors, and the White House are admitting to.
My conclusion is that there are 2 possibilities. One is he's a lot sicker than we know, or 2, the doctors are throwing the kitchen sink at him with the hope that it will work. Or I guess there's a third possibility, is that the doctors are being told to throw the kitchen sink at him by Trump. After all, the doctors making the call here are subordinate to Trump. They're in the military, so they have to respond to his orders, as opposed to, if he were my patient, I wouldn't have to do what you demanded I do to you.
Dr. John Swartzberg of UC Berkeley School of Public Health speaking on KPFA's Upfront Morning program. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden says he'll wait for an all-clear from health professionals before he commits to participating in any further debates with President Trump. Biden shared a stage with Trump, of course, last week. The 2 men were at a distance, but neither wore masks. Speaking at a campaign event in Miami today, a masked Biden wished Trump a speedy recovery, but also called on him to take the pandemic more seriously.
Now that he's busy tweeting campaign messages, I would ask him to do this. Listen to the scientists. Support masks. Support a mask mandates nationwide.
Biden and his vice presidential running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, have both tested negative for the coronavirus. Harris is scheduled to face off with Vice President Mike Pence in a debate Wednesday in Salt Lake City. Pence has also tested negative. The Democratic candidate making a strong run at incumbent South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham came with a plexiglass shield for their first debate this weekend. The candidate spoke from podiums 13 feet apart. Jamie Harrison said he's taking the coronavirus pandemic seriously.
I am taking it seriously. That's why I put this plexiglass up, because, it's not just about me. It's about the people in my life that I have to take care of as well. My 2 boys, my wife, my grandmother.
Both candidates say they tested negative on Friday, but Graham has recently met with other Senate Republicans, several of whom have tested positive for the coronavirus, as well as with President Trump. A Quinnipiac University poll conducted in September showed Graham and Harrison tied. Harrison held a lead among voters between the ages of 18 and 49. Older South Carolina voters favored Graham. Some Kamala Harris supporters are urging her to bring a plexiglass shield to her debate with Vice President Pence on Wednesday. KPFA, by the way, will be broadcasting that debate, which begins at 6 p.m. on Wednesday. And you are listening to the evening news on KPFA in Berkeley, KPFK, Los Angeles, KFCF in Fresno, online at kpfa.org. 2 Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee have tested positive for the coronavirus, raising questions about the timing of the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett and whether additional senators may have been exposed to the coronavirus. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell declared the confirmation process was going full steam ahead despite the dangers of further infections. It's set to start next Monday and last 4 days. At the same time, though, McConnell said the Senate itself would not meet this week as planned because of the outbreak of the virus among senators. North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis, Utah Senator Mike Lee, both said on Friday they had tested positive for the virus. Both attended the ceremony for Coney Barrett at the White House on September 25th, which is now being seen as a likely super spreader event for the virus. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeted that there are now 2 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee who have tested positive for COVID, and there may be more. Schumer said he wished them well, but said it's irresponsible and dangerous to move forward with a hearing, and there's absolutely no good reason to do so.
If it's not safe for the Senate to meet in session, it's not safe for the hearings to go forward. I have asked McConnell repeatedly that all senators get tested and all our staffs get tested, and so far he has not gone along with it, and I think he is very, very wrong.
Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Lindsey Graham suggested the possibility of virtual hearings. Senators, however, cannot vote virtually, so Republicans would need a full slate of committee members to approve Coney Barrett's nomination shortly after the hearings and all of their senators on the floor for a final confirmation vote, which they hope will occur in the last week of October. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court opened its new term today with 2 conservative justices issuing fresh criticism of same-sex marriage. The court is expected to take a strong rightward turn with the expected appointment of Amy Coney Barrett to fill the seat of the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Clarence Thomas commented on an appeal from a former county clerk in Kentucky who had objected to issuing same-sex marriage licenses on religious grounds. Thomas wrote that the 5-4 majority in a 2015 case had read a right to same-sex marriage into the Constitution, even though, he said, that right is found nowhere in the text. He added that the decision enables courts and governments to brand religious adherents who believe that marriage is between one man and one woman as bigots. Gay rights groups and others balked. Alfonso David, president of the Human Rights Campaign, said in a statement that Thomas, who was joined in his criticism by Justice Alito, had renewed their war on gay rights and marriage equality as the direction of the court hangs in the balance. Governor Gavin Newsom nominated the first openly gay black man to the state Supreme Court today, potentially replacing one of the court's more conservative members with a former federal civil rights attorney who prosecuted cross burnings and police misconduct cases under President Ronald Reagan. Martin Jenkins, who's 66 years old, would be the court's first gay member and the third African American to serve on it. In a news conference announcing the nomination, Jenkins said his identity as a gay man has been perhaps the greatest challenge in his life, saying, "I want these young people to know that living a life of authenticity is the greatest gift you can give yourself. And if you do that, you will find yourself in a position where people see you. Jenkins then thanked Governor Newsom for seeing him. Jenkins, a lifelong registered Democrat, must first be confirmed by the Commission on Judicial Appointments after a public hearing for the job. Jenkins would replace Justice Ming Chin, the court's first Chinese-American justice, who was appointed by Republican Governor Pete Wilson in 1996. The court has 2 other Asian-American justices, including the Chief Justice. Jenkins grew up in San Francisco, the son of a stay-at-home mom and a dad who was a clerk and a janitor at the city's iconic Coit Tower. He lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, attended Catholic school, said he wasn't poor, but told the Associated Press his family did not have a lot of disposable income. He played football at Santa Clara University, where he was a team captain and dreamed of playing in the National Football League, and had a brief career playing as a pro. His coach, George Malley, noticed Jenkins's good grades and suggested he go to law school, which he soon did. Malley introduced Jenkins to his friend, Eugene Lynch, who was a judge and became Jenkins' mentor. When Jenkins retired as a federal judge nearly 20 years later, Jenkins replaced him. Since then, he's been appointed to 4 different judgeships by Republicans and Democrats. He retired last year to become Judicial Appointment Secretary for Governor Newsom, helping him vet judicial appointments. The head of emergencies at the World Health Organization says it estimates that roughly 1 in 10 people all around the world may have been infected by the coronavirus. That estimate would amount to more than 760 million people infected, based on the current world population of about 7.6 billion people. That figure, 760 million, far outstrips the number of confirmed cases at just over 36 million people worldwide, as tallied by both the World Health Organization and Johns Hopkins University. The findings are based on an average of antibody studies conducted around the world. Epidemiologists have long said that the number of confirmed cases greatly underestimates the true figure. Dr. Michael Ryan spoke to a special session of the WHO.
Our current best estimates tell us that about 10% of the global population may have been infected by this virus. This varies depending on country, it varies from urban to rural, it varies between different groups. But what it does mean is that the vast majority of the world remains at risk. We know the pandemic will continue to evolve, but we also know we have the tools that work to suppress transmission and save lives right now, and they are at our disposal. The future depends on the choices we collectively make.
The official reported global death toll from COVID-19 passed 1 million on September 28th. That, too, is thought to be greatly underrepresentative of the actual number of lost their lives. WHO Director Tedros Adhanom said that although the pandemic has affected every country, 9 or 10 nations account for 70% of all reported cases and deaths, and just 3 countries, the United States, India, and Brazil, represent half.
It's never too late to change any kind of tide. Every situation can be turned around, and hard-won gains can be easily lost. The pandemic underlines the fundamental importance of investing in public health and primary health care, even as we fight the virus.
The 2-day WHO meeting is the first by the executive committee since the Trump administration set off a 1-year countdown this summer toward pulling the United States out of the WHO next July. Trump has repeatedly accused the World Health Organization of being too accepting of China's explanations of its handling of the pandemic outbreak in Wuhan late last year. On a more conciliatory tone, Assistant Secretary of Health Brett Giroir, the U.S. representative on the board, told the meeting that the United States looks forward to working together to defeat the pandemic. New York City's mayor says he's asked the state for permission to close schools and reinstate restrictions on non-essential businesses in several neighborhoods because of a resurgence of the coronavirus. The shutdowns would happen starting on Wednesday in 9 zip codes in the city. Over the past 2 weeks, the number of new cases of the virus has been rising in pockets of the city, predominantly in neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens that are home to the city's large Orthodox Jewish population.
In Brooklyn and Queens, we're having an extraordinary problem, something we haven't seen since the spring. And we have to address this issue forthrightly. That's why we're here on a Sunday after several days of continuing to review all the data, look at everything from the point of view that has gotten us this far as a city, always relying on the data and the science. What has become clear is that there are a number of neighborhoods now that have continued to have a high level of coronavirus positivity, and that requires stronger action than we've had to take for many months.
Nearly 1,100 people have tested positive in Brooklyn in just the last 4 days, according to state figures. De Blasio said as many as 500,000 people live in the neighborhoods affected by the proposed shutdown. He said the lockdown could be lifted in 14 days or 28 days if the percentage of people testing positive for COVID-19 declines. De Blasio made the announcement shortly after Governor Andrew Cuomo complained that local governments with coronavirus hotspots had not done an effective job of enforcing social distancing rules. Prominent megachurch pastor and conservative activist John Hagee has been diagnosed with COVID-19. That's what his son announced during services at the church his father founded. Matt Hagee said during Sunday morning services at the Cornerstone Church that the 80-year-old pastor received the diagnosis on Friday and was recovering after the illness was detected early. John Hagee founded a ministry that the church says now has 22,000 members. Hagee's been a committed supporter of Israel, founding Christians United for Israel. He's also a stalwart backer of President Donald Trump. The British government today faced huge questions over its coronavirus testing system after a technical glitch led to the underreporting of new infections over the past week or so, a failing that could have given fresh impetus to the current outbreak and ultimately to an uptick in deaths. Health Secretary Matt Hancock faced Parliament today after the opposition Labour Party asked the government to explain why the cases were not tabulated when they should have been. Ollie Barrett reports from London.
In the House of Commons, Matt Hancock acknowledged the gravity of a situation that only came to light on Friday.
This incident should never have happened, but the team have acted swiftly to minimise its impact.
15,841 coronavirus cases were added to the UK's data dashboards over the weekend, having previously been omitted. It's all due to a computing issue involving Excel spreadsheets and an IT system Matt Hancock says he was already phasing out. The opposition Labour Party says it's shambolic and putting lives at risk. Ollie Barrett, London.
Shares in the company that owns the Regal, Cineworld, and Picture House movie theaters fell nearly 60% after it said it will temporarily close the venues because delays to the latest James Bond film left it with few blockbusters to attract customers during the pandemic. Cineworld Group said today that 536 Regal cinemas in the U.S., nearly 130 picture houses in the UK would close on Thursday. Some 45,000 employees are affected. Reporter Simon Marks has more.
One of the world's largest operators of movie theatres says it's considering the temporary shutdown of virtually all its locations, following the news that the release of the much-anticipated James Bond film, No Time to Die, has been postponed yet again. It's now not expected to be made available to audiences until the middle of next year. Cineworld, which operates hundreds of locations in the UK and in the US as Regal Cinemas, says it will make a formal announcement soon. Thousands of jobs are riding on it. George Simpson writes about film for Britain's Daily Express.
Cineworld wasn't in the best financial situation even before coronavirus hit. Similarly, Odeon, who are owned by AMC in the US. AMC reportedly has only 6 months left of liquidity. And it's all well and good for something like James Bond moving to April, but if there's no cinemas to show them in, what's the point? Studios, to try and save money, are skipping the cinema. Like I said, Warner Brothers have a film, Roald Dahl for the Witches, which they're moving to their streaming service. Presumably that will come out on premium on demand as well, digitally. It's a real problem for cinemas.
Cineworld is juggling $8.2 billion in debt, and the fear, of course, is that any temporary shutdown might eventually become permanent. Simon Marks reporting.
And this is the evening news on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org. An hour-long newscast airs each night at 6 o'clock with a half-hour edition on the weekends. It's archived online, so you can listen to it whenever you'd like. It's at kpfa.org. I'm Mark Miracle, and we are now in the final week, the final 4.5 days of the fund drive here, the fall fund drive at KPFA, raising a sum just south of $500,000, the amount of money needed to keep this radio station and the news and information that it brings, and its cultural programming, and its musical programming, and its experimental radio programming. I could tell you about that, but I'm going to keep it a secret. Listen late at night. On the air for the next few months, get us through this rocky ride, this nightmare, this dream sequence, this Alice down the rabbit hole experience. I don't know what you would call it. Trying. I would call it trying. I would definitely apply that adjective to it. $450,000 we need to raise, no joke, by Friday at about this time of the evening. And we need your help to do it. And they've told us programmers here to step on the gas. Another way of putting it is they're turning the screws on us to raise more money at a faster pace so that we make that goal. And so tonight I am now told I have to raise $2,500 by the end of this newscast, which is halfway gone, more than halfway gone. And I don't think I've raised a plug nickel. So I'm going to plug for at least a dime. 1-800-439-5732 is the number to call, or online at kpfa.org. Now, I don't have any baubles, bangles, or beads to jingle over the microphone and seduce you into making a donation, making a contribution, becoming a financial supporter of this listener-sponsored station. No baubles, bangles, or beads, just the news here. And it's a tough sell because the news is always bad. It's a tough sell, but I'm trying to sell it. If you appreciate the kind of journalistic effort that this station puts out, we need your financial support at 1-800-439-5732. We're an alternative to the other news outlets that you can get on broadcast. But we're an alternative because of our independence, and our independence depends on us not being dependent on corporations, advertisers, the federal government, think tanks, foundations. 90% of our money comes directly from you, our listeners. And this is how we do it. We open the microphones and we do these plugs, as they're called. Appeals for your financial support at 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. 1-800-439-5732, kpfa.org. We could stop what we're doing right now and harangue you at great length. But on the other hand, we can't do that because in addition to raising the money in order to carry out our mission, we need to carry out our mission, which in my case is to bring you the evening news. So we're going to return to that newscast, this newscast, and hope that you get the message and hope you will come through with us with a financial contribution at 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. Deadly wildfires in California have burned more than 4 million acres this year. That's a new record for the number of acres burned in a single year. The wildfires have incinerated hundreds of homes and killed 31 people. California Governor Gavin Newsom addressed the state of the state's wildfire conflagrations today. KPFA's Scott Baba reports.
Concerning the ongoing fires, Governor Newsom showed a graph which laid out in acres the largest wildfires in California's history for the last 90 years. To put it in perspective, the fires from the year 1932 to 1999 took up only about a sixth of the governor's pie chart. The fires from 2000 to 2019 took up roughly half. 2020 alone took up the remainder, around a third of the chart. Newsom said that it was hard to miss the pattern.
You'll see a very large red part of the pie representing the August complex, which is now the largest in California's history. It makes up more than all of the fires that occurred between 1932 and 1999. You can see the blue, what has occurred since 2000, just in a decade, the number of fires, and of course this year with the unprecedented number of wildfires here in the state of California. If that's not proof point testament to climate change, I don't know what is.
The August complex fire recently broke 1 million acres. It is currently 54% contained. There are currently 23 major fires burning over 4 million acres across the state. Newsom said that dealing with the North Bay glass fire was one of the state's highest priorities. In the last week, that fire has grown from 11,000 acres to 65,000 acres and has forced the evacuation of tens of thousands of residents of the Napa Sonoma wine country. Newsom said that while the glass fire continues to be a significant problem, the situation is improving.
Some progress on containment, 30%, which is encouraging. What's also encouraging is more favorable weather conditions, more seasonable weather now, later in this week, not the above average temperatures that have occurred. We also were able to withstand some larger wind events over the course of the last number of days, and that's primarily one of the reasons you'll see the large spread in total number of acreage. But progress being made nonetheless on the glass fire remains one of our top priorities.
Regarding COVID, Newsom said that counties around the state continue to make good progress in working their way through the tier system. Under the current rules, every county in the state is assigned a tier based on its test positivity and adjusted case rate. As COVID numbers improve, counties move up the tiers, and each tier allows for looser COVID restrictions. There are currently 4 tiers, with purple being the most impacted and restricted, then red, then orange. Yellow is the highest tier and allows most indoor businesses to reopen, but it requires a positivity rate of less than 2%. Currently, there are only 3 counties that have managed to reach yellow, though Newsom said more counties should join them as early as this week. Newsom said that conditions are improving and counties need to be patient.
Tomorrow, Dr. Galley will update you, as he does every Tuesday, with a status list. There'll be a number of new counties moving into yellow, a number of new counties moving into red and orange. Again, progress in the county tiered status continues. I know it's stubborn for some, and I know some counties want to see it move more quickly, and we do as well. But that's determined not by whims. It's determined by data. It's determined by information that's garnered on the basis of case rates and positivity rates in the framework we put out now a number of months ago.
At the same time, Newsom said that while California has been making progress, vigilance is still required as there appears to be growing evidence of a global resurgence of the coronavirus.
We have made progress here in the state of California with stable case rates, but you're starting to see an increase in COVID-19 cases all across the country. In fact, as of this morning, 21 states have seen an increase in transmission rates of COVID-19. We're seeing this, by the way, not just across the country. You're seeing this increasingly around the world. Take a look at the headlines in France, out of Paris today, what's happening in the United Kingdom, what's been happening in Israel, what Germany is projecting and concerned about. And this is the second wave.
Meanwhile, Newsom also named Judge Martin Jenkins as his nominee for the state Supreme Court. Jenkins briefly played professional football before beginning a career in law and currently serves as Newsom's judicial appointment secretary. If appointed, Jenkins would be California's third black and first openly gay state Supreme Court justice.
Over a distinguished career that spans more than 4 decades, Judge Jenkins has worked at every level of our vaunted legal system. A civil rights attorney, a county prosecutor, a municipal, superior, and federal court judge, then appointed by President Bill Clinton. Somehow, we were able to lure him out of a well-deserved retirement at the beginning of my administration to serve as Judicial Appointments Secretary, where he's helped me elevate some of the most able and diverse legal minds ever assembled to the California bench. And now his career culminates in a seat on the California Supreme Court.
If appointed, Jenkins will fill the vacancy created by Associate Justice Ming W. Chin, who is retiring. I'm Scott Baba, Pacifica Radio, KPFA.
California election officials began mailing 21 million ballots this week to every active registered voter. It's a first for the state. At the same time, counties may offer fewer in-person voting options as they hold the November election in the midst of the pandemic. County election officials are having trouble securing enough polling places because of the pandemic. Counties will be required to open one ballot drop-off location for every 15,000 registered voters for 28 days before the election. County officials can still conduct elections the same way they always have if they wish, but lawmakers expect many will use the new rules. Meanwhile, in Texas, civil rights and voter advocacy groups are suing to block an order by Governor Greg Abbott that reduces the number of drop-off locations for mail ballots to 1 per county. The Republican governor says the order will ensure election security. Democrats blast it as a blatant form of voter suppression. It could force voters to vote in person, a risky move during the pandemic, or to travel hours to find a drop box. Harris County, Texas, is nearly 1,800 square miles. Texas is one of just 5 states not allowing widespread mail-in voting this year. Roz Brown has the story.
The head of the Texas League of Women Voters does not think a last-minute directive to limit ballot drop boxes will stop residents from voting on November 3rd. 2 separate federal lawsuits have been filed to overturn an executive order issued last Thursday by Governor Greg Abbott that restricts ballot drop boxes to 1 per county. Those using drop boxes for absentee ballots are likely to be elderly voters or people with disabilities who are trying to avoid exposure to COVID-19. Grace Shameen, president of the League of Women Voters Texas, calls the governor's actions a perfect example of voter suppression.
It's an example of voter suppression of people who have disabilities and people over 65. It impacts people of color, poor people with no transportation to get to this one site.
Shameen says for many rural counties, 1 drop box is plenty, but a single box in a huge county such as Harris will create long drive times, traffic congestion, and parking issues. The governor has said his order will enhance ballot security and prevent voter fraud. The League of Women Voters of Texas is represented by the Campaign Legal Center in challenging the governor's directive. In Harris County, where ballot drop boxes will be reduced from 12 to 1, more than 40% of residents are Latino and nearly 20% are black. Shameen believes the governor's order will backfire because voters will be even more determined to take part in the democratic process.
I don't think the voters of Texas are going to throw up their hands. I think that this makes the voters of Texas angry and that there is nothing that is going to stop them from voting in this election.
Abbott expanded early voting by 6 days, but others in his party are suing to prevent that expansion. State Republicans also have successfully blocked Democrats' attempts to expand mail-in voting. Support for this reporting was provided by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. For Public News Service, I'm Roz Brown.
And this is the evening news on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK, Los Angeles, KFCF, Fresno, online, kpfa.org.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Edwards-Teekert.
And I'm Kat Brooks.
Weekday mornings we host Upfront.
2 hours of conversation about what's in the news and what should be.
Politics, technology.
Prisons, police.
What's happening in City Hall and at the State House.
In Washington and in the streets.
That's starting at 7 a.m., right after Democracy Now!
On Upfront.
Just a little over 4 days left in the fund drive here at KPFA, the fall fund drive, trying to raise $450,000 to keep this listener-sponsored radio station afloat, which is to say on the air. 4 days to go and quite some distance to go tonight on the news because we have been challenged to raise $2,500, told to raise $2,500 during the news hour. And we are still some distance away from that financial goal. So I'm asking for your help before I resume the newscast, or as I resume the newscast, or after I resume the newscast, or if you could do it before, that would even be better. By giving us a call at 1-800-439-5732. Don't try calling that backwards. Or going online at kpfa.org. 1-800-439-5732, kpfa.org. If the news and information you get from this radio station has some value for you, your family, your neighbors, your fellow citizens, please help us to continue to do this job. 1-800-439-5732 or kpfa.org. A judge blocked Iowa's Secretary of State today from enforcing an order that barred counties from sending absentee ballot applications to voters with their personal information already filled in. Judge Robert Hansen sided with Democratic Party groups who contended that Secretary of State Paul Pate exceeded his authority when he told counties that absentee ballot request forms must be blank when mailed to the voters. Hansen, the judge, ordered Pate to put enforcement of his directive on hold. Local election officials said they were studying the ruling to determine the impact, including whether they could take steps to mail ballots to thousands of voters whose requests were previously invalidated based on Pate's directive. The ruling came the same day that early in-person voting began in Iowa and that counties began mailing hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots to requesters statewide. A law passed in June by the Republican-controlled legislature blocks county officials from using their databases to fill in any missing information on the forms, as they had done in the past. Instead, they must contact voters by email, phone, or mail to get them to fill in the gaps, a lengthy process that's expected to leave many requesting an absentee ballot with incomplete forms and therefore no access to a mail-in ballot. Most of the 750,000 people held in U.S. jails have the right to vote, but a new report from the Prison Policy Initiative finds many of them are unable to, stymied by misinformation, limited access to ballots, and confusion from the officials in charge. Jails seldom have internet access or other simple ways for detainees to request absentee ballots. A few correctional systems have made progress. In March, the Cook County Jail in Chicago became one of the first in the nation to operate as a jail polling station. More than 12,000 people in the state of Wisconsin's jails are reportedly eligible to vote, but may be disenfranchised. Some volunteer groups there are working to change that. Mike Moen reports.
COVID-19 cases in Wisconsin are spiking again, renewing concerns about voter access with Election Day looming. One group in the western half of the state says part of its focus is on potential voters who may otherwise be overlooked. Karen Voss of the nonpartisan volunteer group Chippewa Valley Votes says demand is still strong for absentee ballots, and they're educating local residents about the process, including how to register. They're also working with local authorities on a process for ensuring that people being held in the county jail can participate in the election.
We have in our jail system individuals in the care of our jails who either are registered voters and still have the right to vote and yet are not finding it easy.
Specifically, the group is working with the Eau Claire County Jail to make it easier for people behind bars to vote absentee if they wish. In Wisconsin, people serving misdemeanor sentences or awaiting trial are eligible to vote. In a recent report, the ACLU of Wisconsin found more than half of the responding county jails had no written policies for helping folks who are incarcerated cast their ballots. Voss says there's also concern about reaching voters who are experiencing homelessness. She says even if they don't have a permanent home address, the state still needs proof of residence to allow them to register.
They need the assistance of a letter that identifies their location for living from a social services organization.
That temporary location could be a homeless shelter, but with more people facing homelessness because of the pandemic and economic crisis, it's unclear whether enough people know about this requirement. More information on obtaining this type of letter can be found on the Wisconsin Election Commission's website. Mike Moen, Public News Service. Support for this reporting was provided by the Carnegie Corporation of New York.
A new U.S. Department of Agriculture requirement that millions of boxes of surplus food include a letter from President Donald Trump. The letters have turned up in food distribution programs in the San Francisco Bay Area, including in Hayward and in Oakland. Andrea Sears has the story.
The letters, claiming credit for the program funded by the CARES Act, started appearing in some Farmers to Families food box program deliveries over the summer. But as of last month, the agency has required private contractors, including not-for-profit groups, to include the letter when packing and distributing the food. According to Joel Berg, CEO of Hunger Free America, this may put organizations that are legally prohibited from promoting political candidates in an untenable position.
It's essentially blackmailing nonprofit groups that are doing this food distribution to say, either you help advance the president's reelection or you have to say, oh, we're not feeding hungry people.
Congressional Democrats say the letter may violate the Federal Hatch Act, prohibiting political activities by executive branch employees, but the USDA says it does not. Berg contends the letter, which credits the president with prioritizing sending food to families during the pandemic and includes some suggestions on staying safe from the coronavirus, fails to pass a simple test.
On a purely legal matter, the question is, does something have a governmental purpose? There's no governmental purpose. There's no common sense purpose. The only logical purpose would be to aid a re-election campaign, and that would be illegal.
He adds when he worked at the USDA during the Clinton administration, they removed even the USDA labels from food being sent to food banks. While the contractors packing the food are now required to include the letters in every Farmers to Families food box package, Berg notes they may not be required when the food is finally delivered.
We're being told food banks are getting guidance that they can take the letters out of the boxes, and I hope many of them do. We don't take sides in campaigns one way or another. We just don't think our tax dollars should be doing that either.
Some food banks have reportedly consulted lawyers to make sure the letters don't jeopardize their nonprofit status or violate election laws. For Public News Service, I'm Andrea Sears.
Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti has switched his endorsement in the hard-fought L.A. County District Attorney race from incumbent Jackie Lacey to challenger George Gascon. Garcetti said in a statement that Gascon knows how to promote public safety through partnerships with and beyond law enforcement. Garcetti had endorsed Lacey before Gascon got into the race. Gascon's the former district attorney of San Francisco. He also has support from California Senator and Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris, Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors. As San Francisco DA Gascon expunged marijuana convictions and backed statewide criminal justice reform measures. But he drew criticism from racial justice activists for failing to prosecute any of the police officers involved in high-profile killings of unarmed black and brown San Franciscans, including Mario Woods, Jessica Williams, Luis Gongora Pat, and others. Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley announced today she will reopen an investigation into the killing of a black man at a BART train station by a transit officer 11 years ago. Oscar Grant was fatally shot in the back by Bay Area Rapid Transit officer Johannes Messerly while on the floor of a train station on New Year's Day in 2009. Messerly was charged with murder, but a Los Angeles County jury found him guilty only of involuntary manslaughter. He served 11 months. Messerly claimed he mistakenly grabbed his gun instead of his taser. Alameda County Prosecutor O'Malley's announcement came just hours after Grant's family held a news conference at the train station asking her to investigate the role of another officer in Grant's death. The family wants charges to be filed against former officer Anthony Perrone, who pinned Grant down with a knee to his neck in a manner similar to that used in the death of George Floyd, who died in police custody in Minneapolis. O'Malley said in a statement that she had listened to the requests of the family of Oscar Grant. O'Malley said she's assigned a team of lawyers to look into the circumstances of the incident. Vigils and walks were held across Canada this weekend to mark Sisters of Spirit, which remembers missing and murdered Native women and girls. Antonia Gonzalez reports.
The Native Women's Association of Canada held a virtual gathering due to COVID-19 safety concerns. Families remembered their missing and murdered loved ones. Maggie Sidewink talked about her sister Sonia, who went missing in 1994 and was later found murdered. She encouraged families, saying there's hope to move forward, heal, and find a collective voice.
It is our responsibility as families to take the actions necessary. We can't wait for police. We can't wait for the government to do those actions for us. And vigils are one way, but other ways are actually when we go out and search for the missing, when we lend, if we can, be a part of the fundraisers that families need to do in order to raise those funds. We need to join the fight, and we need to join in any way that we can to find useful in helping others heal.
Advocates say they're working with families, Indigenous groups, and governments. The Native Women's Association of Canada is calling for the creation of an investigative unit to examine cold cases, the creation of a database, and a healing initiative run by Indigenous women.
I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
We're in the final minute of the newscast tonight, and we are still short of our $2,500 financial goal here in the final week, actually the final 4.5 days of the fund drive here at KPFA, trying to raise the money to keep this radio station on the air. And we need your help at 1-800-439-5732. Do what you can do. If it's a little, give a little. If it's a lot, give a lot. 1-800-439-5732. Or online at kpfa.org. Fog tomorrow morning in the San Francisco Bay Area should clear off by the afternoon. High of 70 degrees around the bay, but further inland, a high of 90 degrees under mostly sunny skies. Mostly sunny in the central San Joaquin Valley tomorrow. A little cooler, highs in the mid-90s. Mostly sunny in Los Angeles, highs in the upper 80s.
Tune in Monday nights, starting at 7 p.m. with Africa Today, a weekly program providing information and analysis about Africa and the African diaspora, hosted by Walter Turner. At 8 p.m., it's a soul sonic rhapsody of word, sound, and power on transitions on traditions, hosted and produced by Greg Bridges. Then at 10 p.m., eclectic beats and rhythms take you into Tuesday with Off the Beaten Path, featuring weekly rotating hosts. That's Monday nights on 94.1 FM, KPFA, and kpfa.org.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR in Santa Cruz, and online worldwide at kpfa.org.
You're listening to KPFA.